Hello, 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 and welcome to the Mystic Nerd Squad podcast. Your host here, Kelly Meyerson. I'm breathing a breath of fresh air. I'm just coming off of a vacation and some weeks off, and back to school mode is in full effect here in New Jersey. So I'm really excited to get back into season 2 of the Mystic Nerd Squad podcast. And you guys, if you've been following along, we've had a very exciting book that has launched. It's called Wealth Codes. And my guest today is an amazing author in this book. And I want to tell you something. So if you've been with me for a hot minute, you know these books are full of juicy details and ways to improve your life. This one, no different. There are 25 authors in this book. My guest today, Stephanie Zito, is one of them. Now, I had initially planned for myself to start at the beginning of the book and go to the end, but what if you started at the end and went to the beginning? And the reason I'm saying this is because Stephanie is our author for chapter 25, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, Vision Casting. You had the power all along. Channel right your way to limitlessness. And oh my gosh, I loved your chapter so much, which I said, we will talk about that later, but we're sort of like starting with the end in mind. That's where we're vision casting, where we're going to be. So let me tell you a little bit about Stephanie, and let me also say that she and I have been circling in the same wonderful group of entrepreneurs and holistic people, and it's really exciting because you can sort of feel, I don't know if this is the same for you, Stephanie, but this amplification and this rising positive, exciting energy of something new on the horizon. So I just love being part of that with you. You feel that as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's just such a beautiful feeling of support and just the word synergy of everyone sort of like in a similar vein and what we're seeking to co-create in the world. It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And I think the most exciting part about it is there's so much space for everybody to have
Hmm.
success and to do what they do. And this is what makes me super excited. So, Stephanie is an intuitive soul purpose coach who sees right through the stories and blocks that hold clients back from the success they desire. Through intuitive insight and channeling their soul guides, she helps clients quantum leap and make the shifts for their freedom and happiness. Stephanie is also a transformative speaker and a podcast host of This Passionate Life. Her mission is to help you follow your inner spark and receive the freedom and healing that comes from following your intuition. So officially, welcome to the podcast, Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, Kelly.
Yeah, and I want to tell you all, you need to check out her podcast. So everything will be linked in the show notes. So you can just sit with the delicious cup of coffee or tea or whatever beverage of choice and just listen and soak in all of the wisdom that comes out of our conversation today.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to have you on my podcast too.
We're doing this for sure. This is my favorite thing. So I really loved the way that you wrote your chapter. And so people who haven't had a chance to read it yet are just going to have to feel like on the edge of their seat, excited to read it. But I felt in your story, I felt like I was there with you. You had such a beautiful way of describing the events in your story and how you did that. So what makes me really curious is, how did you come to be interested in writing?
Oh my goodness. Thanks for asking that question. I mean, I feel like writing has really been a part of my life even since high school when I had one of those teachers, Mrs. Popson, who took us outside in like on a cold, windy day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and had us like feel the rain and write about it, or we write about a rock. Like she was just very artsy. And I just feel like she just all made us feel so special when we read our poetry. And I
Mm,
just, writing is a really beautiful way just to get your message across, in a certain way, and to help explore those details. And for me, I feel writing is really translated into the intuitive writing, which, man, when I look back at the intuitive writing and I see where I am right now and what I had written, and when I look back and I'd see these patterns over and over again, I'm like, okay, clearly when I wasn't sure where the path was going, like there it is. You can see the breadcrumbs lining up. So those are some reasons why I love reading. I love reading people's stories, and I love writing too.
Yeah, and I think what's really special is when as a writer you can bring in all the senses so that people can really get into the moment with you.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I had my English teacher in high school. Her name was Mrs. Jones, and she was a stickler for the rules of writing.
Hmm.
So she made us write a paper a week and like criticize ourselves and be like, where did I get it wrong? Oh, I'm not good at spelling. I got to fix the punctuation. Those sentences are running on. So I know when I went to college and, a lot of classes, they'd be like, oh, yeah, you have to write a 2 to 3 page paper. I was like, I did that like all the time. That's totally easy for
No
me.
big deal. Yeah.
No big deal. No big deal. But I always, same as you, just loved the creative writing, the journaling, the poetry, like letting that come out. So you mentioned, writing channeled messages. You didn't say it exactly that way.
Hmm.
But that really excites me about you because I've been writing and it took me a long time to realize, probably just in the past few years, that sometimes the writing that's coming out of my journal is not present tense, Kelly, this form, in the 3D. It's coming from someplace else. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wonder, how do you know that it's intuition that's coming through versus like just random thoughts in your head?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I feel like that's a question, I teach intuitive courses, and like 99% of the time, that's the question that we ask when we're kind of first diving into knowing our intuition. And one of the best ways that I begin to understand where my intuition is coming from is first getting to understand like where we're feeling, talk about feeling, where we're feeling things in the body. Like we get this
Mm.
three-dimensional body and we can use it. So, for me, I can sort of differentiate where I have like my thought patterns going, or where it's my fear pattern going, especially like where is it fear, is it intuition, versus to me, it becomes like a different place when it's my intuition flowing through. And I feel like to get there, it takes practice. And it also takes these different intuitive tools like a body scan, which is just a meditation where you're just going through your body without any judgment, and just understanding, well, what am I feeling? What's coming through? What am I experiencing? Even if it's like a flash of color or like a random thought, like just seeing it, because sometimes we miss a lot. Like we might get a random thought. It might be like a cheeseburger. Like I've had that when I was channel writing. I was channel writing with my grandma when I was leading a group, and I had this cheeseburger come through. And I know now to not ignore that. In the past, I would have been like, that's random. That's just some weird thing like coming through. But I was like, okay, let's get curious. Okay, well, tell me more about this cheeseburger. And it turned out to be this like amazing message, like leading me to her dining room table in her little cramped dining room in her home in Long Island, and all of our family crowded around it. And okay, well, why am I seeing this? Like, ask more. Oh, it's because it's showing you that connection with family, that, that intimacy, that specialness. So, and the message was in there. I had to dive deeper. And that to me is one of the most important pieces around intuition, is not ignoring these kind of little signs or basic signs, because typically you might see that and just like pass it off, but we're actually getting things like that all the time. And when we allow ourselves to like bring that in, like, no, this isn't just my thoughts. And you know what, guess what?
Hmm.
We are actually these divine beings right? These like pieces of source that came down in this form, like as Kelly, as Stephanie, to experience this body, to experience this world. So what if my thoughts get to be divine connection too? Like I don't have to, we feel like we have to differentiate these things and separate them. Like, guess what? What if we don't? I mean, those thoughts can be like divinely led also. Like that's fine.
Oh my gosh, that bit is so delicious. I love that we get to be little pieces of divine in it. The idea for me that it can all just be,
Mm-hmm.
like a cheeseburger can be meaningful and not just
Mm-hmm.
a lunch, So that's what really excites me, because I think for me what happens there is there's this ease and this
Mm-hmm.
flow, and it doesn't always have to be about figuring out where is this, which is this, but like that it just gets to be,
Mm-hmm.
and the possibility, and the for us the experience that it's connected to the divine, and us being connected to the divine, and us being pieces of source. I love that. That's
Mm-hmm.
poetic even. I think there's a poem in there somewhere.
There probably is. Well, and I know, and even in writing my chapter, I, talked with Jen Pacino, our head author, and I was getting in my head about it, and I knew my story. I mean, I've told this story several times, so it's not new to me. It's just there became like this like little aspect of perfectionism coming in, that because it was going on paper, it had to be perfect and I had to write it a certain way. And she helped remind me again, like it's like these constant reminders to, for me, like there's a certain sort of feeling when I get into the channel, like I call it like the channel, where I know it's like coming from something sort of greater than myself. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was really helpful to get that kind of coaching and get that reminder, uh, just to kind of get out of my own way a little bit and just to let it flow. That's the beauty about what we call like channel writing, is that you're just letting it flow out. And so even if you're writing, I feel really stuck, this feels silly, I'm not sure what to write next, like that's actually part of it. And it helps unlock that, like, okay, I put it on paper, that's out there now, I don't have to keep rolling that through my brain. So okay, great, you feel stuck, well, what's next?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. That's tremendous, because I think it becomes this little inner dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and I love channeling, and it's funny enough. Just this week, I was having a conversation with Jen Pisano, who's the lead author on Wealth Codes, and I just had like this like knock on my head, like, yeah, you're a channel. That's part of
Mm-hmm.
like what you're here to do. And I never had a message so significant as that. And Jen had said, well, what if you channel messages for other people? And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. But as I thought about it, and this is something you talk about too, like sort of going back and looking at the track record of things that you've written and what you've done. And I've always done that. I've always
Mm-hmm.
sat down to write a card for someone, and the words just flowed out the way that they were
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be for that person. And it wasn't a thinking, it was a feeling. It was something
Mm-hmm.
that came out of my heart, not out of what are the best words to use for this. So, yeah, that I think that just kind of made me think of that, and how exciting it is to do that, and not that none of us can do it, that it's available to everybody.
Well, that's, I think, the, part of, oh my gosh, like, there's totally another book that I feel like is coming through that, see, this is the thing. So we have, I think, sort of these like created beliefs because of our society and because we've just come through like this patriarchal society where, we've had a lot of sort of cultural appropriation. And I think in that, the intuitive arts, I think, are really just having their day again. They're coming back to the forefront. I see so many more things, even in mainstream culture, around intuition, and it's sort of being not only accepted but sought after in corporate culture. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing about it is, well, why do we even question we're intuitive? Why would we even question if all of us are literally channels from source, like we are, like that? What if we just knew that? And one of the main reasons is because that's a very scary proposition to like the powers that be, to those who are in power. Because if everyone has intuition, if everyone is in their own power, if everyone's healing themselves, then there's a lot of stuff we don't need. I mean, it's a much more kind of circular culture where everyone is kind of literally equal.
Mm.
So it just kind of, I love learning from other people. Like I have coaches, of course, and yet it's a difference between that and like that feeling of, well, these people, they know more than me, so I have to listen to their every word. It's like dismantling kind of guru culture too.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This is juicy. This is so exciting. I'm 100% with you, and I feel like this is a conversation that's happening,
Mhm.
in the circles and, with intuitive people I follow as well. Like it becomes an equalizer. It
Yes.
becomes like just a natural way that, like you said, if you're your own guru, if you have your own intuition, if you're not looking to some authority to tell you what to be doing, then
Hmm.
then you don't need a lot of things. There's not much you need.
Right. And it gets to be like a both and. Like, yes, of course, I, love studying new things and learning from other people, and I have coaches. So I have that. I go to doctors and I take in what I'm, receiving. And it's just a very different place to be in. Like, where does the power center lie? Like, I know it lies
Mm,
within me. And what I've found, and I think, a lot of people you probably talk to as well as entrepreneurs, is like when you have that and when you're coming from an intuitive place, I'm not spending thousands of dollars on certain kind of marketing techniques, because when I'm coming from an intuitive place, like I know where my energy system does best. And so I get to kind of follow that versus blindly following. Like there's a gajillion ways we can market ourselves. So it can get overwhelming. And the beauty is when we get into that intuitive place, like the decisions come a lot quicker and the
mm-hmm.
downloads of what to do next. Like a lot of where my business has flowed has come through those intuitive hits. And also the reminder that like when we're in that space, we're actually in a co-creation. Like for example, I do these live sessions on an app called Insight Timer, and a lot of my downloads will come in the co-creation. Like clearly it's not just about me. If I'm leading some course or something, it's like about those who are participating. I mean, it's coming from the participants who are there. Like it's in community. So when we look
Mm-hmm.
at like our businesses, even like we are in community, whoever we're reaching like is in a co-creation with us together, and we're actually all in this co-creation, just like you mentioned with this group of authors, in really like the uplifting of humanity, of one another. Like that's the whole point.
I love
So
it. I love it. I'm like sitting on my
yeah.
hands, biting my tongue because I'm just like, oh, this is juicy. This is so good.
Yay.
So I'm 100% with you on that, and I think that I think is at the heart and the beauty of following your intuition, and
Mm,
being present with those inner messages you receive. And, I mean, I come from like the classically trained, like, perfect ways to present something,
mhm.
right? Where
Right.
you're standing at the front of the room, you're the expert, you have your PowerPoint slides, you've rehearsed all of your moves and your motives. But man, there is nothing that's exciting and as uplifting as kind of just showing up available with all of the background knowledge and everything you need, but showing up available for something new to be born in that moment,
Mhm.
and for like the energy and the growth to be available for both you as the presenter and that co-creation that happens. That to me is like where like true bliss lies. If we were
Mhm.
Jen, we would say that's ecstatic living. That's that
Mhm.
like place where we're ready to receive anything. Anything is possible.
Yeah, and I think, there's definitely like I work at a retreat and I do vision casting, like literally the same presentation, the same workshop every week, right? And yet like when I go in there, every time is slightly different, because when we go in, so this comes to vision casting and that sort of method, when I'm going into a certain situation like that, if I vision cast right, for that situation, if I create my intentions for that situation, it's going to be like its own co-creation.
Mm.
So, every individual who is experiencing that vision casting workshop, it's not just like, well, here's a pizza. I mean, which could also be a miraculous event, eating that pizza. Clearly. But to me, it's like I don't know your exact story. I do know that this information can be really powerful and potent. Let's see how it interacts with you. Like, I'm coming in sort of with that beginner's mind too, of like, you have this whole history, right? You're an experienced being. Maybe you're a middle-aged person. Like, you've had this rich life. Like, you have a lot of knowledge and power. Let's kind of see like how this interacts with you. So I'm not just like delivering a cookie cutter workshop every week. Every week is like its own beautiful, co-creation.
Mm. Well, and I think this is the way that the universe can work through us when we're just open to
Mhm.
sharing and experiencing the moment and not contriving in our minds what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I think when we do what it's supposed to be, we can sort of like, cut it off before it's time. Like, that's the whole thing about manifesting is, if we think, well, this is how life is supposed to be, or I'm supposed to make this amount of money, we might actually like short circuit the process and actually have less or do less than, which might feel safe. But there might be like so much more available, yeah, when we get into like that more sort of to me it feels like a little more magical space.
Yeah. And what I'm
Yeah.
thinking too is that if I'm an attendee, if I'm participating with you, you're presenting with this open energy that is an invitation for me to come out of myself a little bit than and what I might, have originally done. And
Yeah.
I've done all the vision boards, the vision
Mhm.
boards. I've taught people to do vision boards, and now I'm sort of like, oh, what is the evolution of that, and what
Mhm.
could that look like? And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
especially today, kind of, it's such a different time and place than it was even just a couple years ago. Or if we go
Mhm.
back 4 years before COVID and the pandemic, and just like the total shift in how we interacted. So, what does it look like today, in today's day and time, for us to be really tapped into our intuition?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's literally like a daily, it's daily living. Like, when we're tapped in with our intuition, I feel like we are in the most intimate relationship with ourselves, and also with where what I feel like can be one of the biggest lessons on our planet as humans is to love ourselves. And so when we're coming from that space, I feel like it can shift everything. It shifts the way we interact with people. It can shift the way we receive people's interactions with us and information. It can shift the way we choose to eat our food. I mean, there's so much we can be doing, which is like just going through the motions. And this is why I actually wrote this chapter, because if we get into a place where we feel like we're just going into through the motions, or life is feeling a little less magical, or we feel like, there is something else out there, or I know I want to change my job, or maybe even my relationship, but that feels really scary. Like, that is what this process is for. And it's taking us through a process of, it's the last chapter. We're looking at like where we want to go. We want to look at the future. We want to look at like the big picture, but not from a place necessarily with the vision boards. I love vision boards. And sometimes we have these representations like, I want a Ferrari. And it's, well, let's go underneath the energy of the Ferrari. So it may not necessarily be, the Ferrari is like a symbol. And yet when
Mm-hmm.
we get the Ferrari, like, how do we feel? Do we actually feel fulfilled? Like, what were we really looking for? Maybe we were feeling like a sense of accomplishment or a sense of fulfillment, right? So when we look at like, well, what do we really want? If I want money, well, why do I really want money? I probably want freedom. I want to thrive. I want to feel secure. So when we look at those underpinnings, um, it can kind of take us back to like, well, I can literally feel some of those things today. Just
Mm-hmm.
because I don't have that Ferrari doesn't mean I can't feel that I'm thriving today. How can I bring that into my life today? And what's interesting is when we do that, what do we know? Like we generate more of that, right? It becomes sort of that snowball effect. Like when we're in that
Mm-hmm.
space, in that higher vibration, it allows ourselves to attract more of that which we desire. It allows those synchronicities to kind of line up and for us to see them because we're in that space to receive it. We're in that vibrational space too.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I nerd out on the science that backs it up, because this is
Oh,
where my background is in science and
oh,
as an occupational therapist. Oh, see, you get excited too, but
yeah.
it's they're not separate; they're one and the
No.
same.
Hmm.
So that's
Hmm.
where, like you said, we exist in gratitude. Our reticular activating center in the base of our brain starts to attract more of what we're looking for. So like
Hmm.
you said, if it's I'm enjoying my car I have today, I'm feeling how it feels to be in gratitude,
Hmm.
and suddenly like the bliss that you wanted from the Ferrari is available right now. You don't
Hmm.
have to get that to feel that. And so your
Hmm.
brain starts to realize and repattern. This is where it gets really exciting because you can change the way you think and you
Hmm.
start to attract different things for yourself.
Hmm.
So I can give an example because probably some people are going, huh? What does that mean exactly? So I used to hate commuting to work. I used
Hmm.
to like dread the traffic. I used to be like, oh, if it's backed up, I'm going to be stuck. I might be late. And I changed my perspective on that. I had gratitude for the environment around me. I have this beautiful drive before I get to the highway through like country roads and looking at the green grass and the trees and the clouds and listening to music or a really good podcast. And so, like, when I get into traffic now, it's like, oh, I get to do more of this
Hmm.
moment. This doesn't become
Hmm.
like, I stop living my life from, point A to point B because I'm just commuting.
Hmm.
Commuting is a beautiful time of self-care and, like you said,
Hmm.
self-love for myself.
Hmm.
So anyway, I think that's what gets me excited, that the science and the spiritual piece of things are just one and the same.
Well, I love that you have. I had never heard that before. I mean, I understand it, but to describe it the way you did so nicely, so I could understand that is just beautiful. And I feel like that's really helpful for a lot of people because I think we can talk about these techniques, but to actually have it backed by science is, I don't know, it's just like the extra level of like, oh, okay, I can trust this. It actually does work. And what you're saying is like, precisely, I feel if we could do nothing else for anytime we're feeling like life is running us versus us being sort of in control of sorts with our day or with our life, like this is the technique right here. Like this is the how to design your day. It's to look at your tasks, look at your to-do list. This is like part of my chapter, so not to give away too much, but and just to actually go through like, well, where's an area where it kind of sucks, like my commute. How can I write this down in the present tense with the feelings I desire? Well, what am I doing that can make this a little sweeter, just like you did? It's exactly it. So that you could spend all this energy being super frustrated, and then what happens? Thoughts become things. So this is something Joe Dispenza talks about in his book, Becoming
Mm-hmm.
Supernatural too, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I hate commuting, it's bad, and then I go into my workplace and I'm already carrying that energy, that's actually filtering into my hormones. It's
Mm-hmm.
filtering into my organs. This is why we have things like inflammation and the stress response. And so we're literally creating more vibrant health within our bodies when we utilize a technique like that too. So we feel better and we're literally like impacting our own like physical makeup as well.
Yeah, and it really is such a magical process because once you start and you see the success in one area, it becomes okay, where else? Where else am I doing
Yeah.
this for
Hmm.
myself? So, this feels like a great time to talk about like how do people check in with their intuition anytime, for something big, for something small?
Hmm.
What is the process for doing that if somebody's a beginner and they've never done this before?
Yeah, I think a great first place to come into is, as I was mentioning, to practice that body scan meditation. And I have a resource, a link where you can find that on Insight Timer if you're new to it. So just understanding, like, well, where am I holding tension in my body? Where do I feel fear in my body? Where do I feel a
Mm-hmm.
sense of like, no, this is not for me? Where do I feel that sense of like, yes, this feels amazing? So that's a great place to start. Then the second step I would say is to try what we call this sway test. And when I show the sway test, or we practice the sway test at this retreat, like I love it because we get into a place of asking like the big questions, and it's fascinating because you get your answers really quickly. You might get answers you're like, oh, I knew it, but I didn't really want to know that. So that then the next step is like if I'm getting this answer, like let's say it's a big one, like, I really feel like it's time to leave this relationship or to leave this job in this particular way. Like that could feel very scary. And we can kind of be ignoring the signs and signals because we don't know what to do with that information. So we practice the sway test. And the sway test, you can do it full body where you're standing up, and typically the body will move forward for a yes question, and it'll move backwards for a no question. So if I tell my body something like a lot, like a yeah, like a truth, let's start with the truth. My name is Stephanie. My body will lean into that. Well, yeah, of course your name's Stephanie. Is my name Bob? Well, no, I'm going to lean away from like, that's not true. I'm going to lean away from that. You can do it with something like that you like that's healthy. Let's go. Otherwise, it can get confusing a little bit. Like, I love olives. Give me olives all day. So, I love olives? That's a statement that's true. What does my body tell me? Does it agree? Yes, it's going to most likely lean forward. I love
Mm.
sardines. That's a hard no. It's going to move back. It's going to back away from that. Like, do not give me that plate of sardines. So, and then we can go into something that really matters. So, thinking about what's on your plate, what's the decision you're really looking to make. And then what I like to do is we're not going to ask, should I? Because that has a lot of other weight on it, the weight of the world and our parents and society. Should I? Am I meant to is also kind of a question like that. We're going to avoid a question like that, but we're going to ask it like, is it in my best and highest good? Is it
Mm.
in my best and highest good to write another book? Well, that's probably a full body yes for both of us. So leaning forward on screen here. Is it in my best and highest good to shut down my business? Like, well, no. I mean, I'm just kind of saying something random, but you can ask the real questions and just see what happens and just play with it. If you're someone who feels a little stuck with it, bring curiosity to, well, why is this hard right now? And just notice the first thing that comes to mind is probably the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times, and having developed or in always developing my intuition and cracked open one area and the next area, the ego can come in. And
Mm.
sometimes like I'll doubt, like I'll get a past loved one's name or a flower, and I'll tell myself the reason why that can't be it. Like this all happens very quickly. And I have to remind myself, like, just say it. And 9 times out of 10, like that's a hit for them. It's meaningful to them. So it's like letting our ego kind of get out of the way and just trust. Like, well, what if it is right? What does it mean if it's not? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be okay. So those are
Mm-hmm.
two like real simple ways to start into kind of that process of trusting the intuition and playing with it. Like it gets to be playful too. It gets to be fun.
I agree with you. One of my favorite things to do is to just sort of play with it while I'm driving. It's going to
Hmm.
sound like I'm always driving, but that's not true. Just give it a little bit. But, like driving to work is better to go right or left. And like
Oh yeah.
going with like my first gut instinct because, I know your intuition can live like towards your spleen, right? And
Hmm.
and typically it's very quiet and non-emotional and speaks once and then it's done. This has been my experience. So
Hmm.
I wait for like there's a quiet right left and I just follow it and see what
Hmm.
happens. And almost I would say every time I get a right, I'm like, okay, don't try to make a left there, make a right, go the back route, come around, and it's the easier way to take the path. So,
Hmm.
I think that has been kind of a fun way to play with it and just sort of see in like very like, non-big situations how my intuition talks to me. And I don't know if this is true for everyone, but when my intuition talks to me versus my ego or thoughts in my head, it's typically non-emotional.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to let my cat out. And
Go ahead.
and then I want to talk about that part. So just 1 second, I'll be right
No
back.
problem. Go for it. I love this. So as you're listening and waiting for Stephanie to come back on, I want you to think about where in your life are you experiencing intuition?
You know how
No
they
problem.
are. If the door is open, they want it closed. If it's closed, they want it open.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and it's sort of, it just goes with the flow. It's just part of what we're meant to do. So as you stood up, I was saying to people in the audience, think about times when you have used your intuition and you're sort of retrospectively thinking like, oh, I remember that, whether it was a big thing or a little thing. One example I'm thinking of is like, when you're walking at night, you're by yourself and you just kind of feel this feeling of like, cross the street, go inside, don't go there, or whatever it happens to be.
Like if you stop at a stoplight and sometimes you're like, I really feel like I should just take one more pause before I go. And then sure enough, like some car exactly they blew the red and you're like, yes, thank you. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to talk about the whole spleen situation and does it feel emotional? So this to me is really interesting because I think what I hear you talking about is kind of our human design, which we don't have to get into the weeds about, but that's sort of this whole system of understanding how we operate and how we best make decisions. So in human design, we have these different authorities, right? And so you might be, and I don't want to get like too deep into it, but like,
we can go super deep. This is like one of the things I geek out on.
Okay.
This is me leaning in. Yes, I'm in. I'm in. Go ahead.
And it might be like the solar plexus. So for me, I know that I am a manifesting generator with an emotional authority. So for me, I'm going to actually get the emotional hit. So versus like the more, I guess like stayed, like it just feels like a neutral yes. For instance, it might feel more like that. But for me, what's going to happen is I'm going to get that like, yeah, like excited, like full body, yes, like, let's do it. And so what's important for me though with that is typically 9 times out of 10, it's going to be like a go. However, in my authority, I need to take a breath, take a step back, take a moment to like, let myself feel into it, and then go. Because otherwise, because I can get so excited, I might say yes to things and then overextend myself. Or, when I actually think about like, there's this girls' trip. Well, do I actually really want to go on that girls' trip at that time? Like, so I get to take that moment of pause. Like, let me get back to you is a really good statement for me, so that I can like really check in. Like, yes, this is an opportunity I really do vibe with. Otherwise, like I want to do everything. And they'll just get overextended. So It's actually really helpful to understand that too. This is why I feel like whether you know your human design or not, if you check in with when it is your intuition or you feel back to those times your intuition was talking to you or helping you, that just helps like, yeah, it feels like it's down in my gut and it just felt really neutral. Or oh, for me, I really felt this heart spark when it was a yes, or I felt my heart sinking when it was a no. Like, that's fine just to identify, how you feel it coming through.
Yeah, I love that. Also manifesting generator, also emotional authority, also have had the experience of like a quick yes when I'm in like that high of the emotional and saying yes. And then when I go to the low, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Why didn't I say yes and figure out how to backpedal? But what I find is I need 24 hours at least, especially if it's something I'm not sure. There are things that I know is like a hell yes. And like immediately a yes. Like when, Jen invited me to write in Wealth Codes, I was like, immediately it's a yes. I didn't need to think about it. I didn't need to, I knew like my whole body, it was a whole body yes. Like I could feel the tingling, the movement, like let's
Yeah.
go. Whereas like you said, when somebody is like, how about we go out to dinner on a Wednesday night? I'm like, let me get back to you on that. Like you said, I
Yeah.
really have to think through, like, am I energetically going to be able to do that?
Mhm.
And kind of go through all of the feelings. And then when I make decisions, it's sort of like I go really high, really low, come back to my stable middle, and that's
Mhm.
where I make a decision from. And I think when I let the emotion kind of run through my body,
Mhm.
then my spleen can come in and go, and tell me if it's a yes or it's a no, or it's my gut and it's a yes or it's a no.
Right. Yeah, 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 sure. So what's interesting to me is when we get like, so let's say we say yes, right? Let's say like it's a full body yes, I want to write in this book. Well, then what happens? Because let's say I want to run a retreat. I'm like, great, that's awesome. Okay, guides, I hear you. So now what? Because now we have this whole proposition on the table. Maybe there's a monetary investment, maybe there's like this whole process. Well, now how do I do this? And I think a lot of times what can happen is then we come back into our own state of, well, I'm doing this alone, this is just me, and I feel overwhelmed and it's all on my shoulders. So that's another time when it can be really helpful, I see you nodding, to tap
Mm-hmm.
into the intuition. And to me, our intuition includes sort of the inner voice, our soul, so to speak, speaking to us, our highest self, and our guides. Like we are receiving information from what we can call the whole quantum field, the whole field of information, which includes our soul guides, it includes our past loved ones, it includes our guardian angels. Like this is available to everybody. We're already doing it. Sometimes it's just like making those distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
So to actually succeed and thrive in the process, I think it's really helpful to remind ourselves, okay, I said yes to this for a reason. Now, how can I allow myself to be divinely guided through it? How can I find my way towards what's my next step or my next best decision so I can make
Mm-hmm.
this happen? Because we might get a hit like, I'm really meant to write a book. We can sit on that for 4 years and nothing happens. So when you get that hit, like we actually can, I don't know if I want to say like speed up the process so that it feels like too fast, but we can actually like get these things going quicker or like in the time frame they're meant to. Like when we go from that decision to then, okay, if I am divinely guided, then I'm not doing this alone. Like I'm meant to do this for a reason. How can I allow in that guidance on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, so I can actually make this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think I where I got tripped up in the past is I'd get that full body yes, I'd say yes, and then it's like, and now like it's this huge thing, and how do I even go forward? And so I'd go right into like masculine energy mode, like I'm gonna get stuff done. I'm gonna
Right.
make a to-do list, I'm gonna do this. And I think what I realized is like that was relying on me to do it, like you said,
Mhm.
versus like I've got a whole team behind me. So
Mhm.
I find for me, the best way to approach it is okay, I'm here. I need to continuously be checking in with my guides, my higher self. I need to be sitting down. For me, I like to go into the Akashic Records. I know that's something you do as well.
Mhm.
And allow other voices to come in and to provide me support so that I don't feel like it's me and my own energy achieving things, which I think
Mhm.
for some people listening could be like, okay, so what the heck does that mean exactly? Like that it's not just you doing it, but it it in that way I've been able to crush timelines and
Yes.
not feel like the overwhelm of so many things to do. And I've
Mhm.
also realized, geeking out on the human design piece of things, because I have an undefined head and ajna. So,
Mhm.
neither of those are defined, nor are there any gates that are.
Ah, Mercury is playing with us. You are frozen. I don't know if I should go out. Let me see. I'm gonna message Kelly here.
It
There she is.
also makes it a full channel so that I don't need to worry about me like thinking and figuring things out. I can allow the solutions to drop in, which is a much easier way. And I have a defined throat, manifesting generator, defined
Mhm.
throat.
Mhm.
So a lot of the work that I did for myself was to figure out that I could trust in the universe in terms of like bringing in the ideas and the creation and what to actually quote unquote do. And then I could trust in my voice, whether I'm writing, speaking, interviewing people on my podcast. I could trust what comes out and trust in myself.
Mhm.
So that to me has been a big game changer. And I tried to think my way through a lot of things and have realized that that's not the way that works for me. It's the
Mhm.
silence, the stillness, the tuning into myself, tuning into my intuition, my heart, being guided there for what to do next. And
Mhm.
sometimes, like, I don't know if this has happened to you, but when I've done that, sometimes the guidance is go take a nap,
Mhm.
take a month off,
Mhm.
go hang out with your family, go take a walk, go wash the dishes, enjoy like just living your life. It's like,
Mhm.
and you know what? Like you said about the cheeseburger, like you didn't just ignore the cheeseburger. I didn't ignore that. I
Mhm.
honored it coming from like a very, loving space, and it's always worked out for me.
Yeah, I love that so much, and I feel like it really, cuts down on a lot of the fear, and overwhelm. It's exactly that of, like, getting into that headspace or that masculine energy. I love how you said that too, of, like, just crushing timelines, and it's so interesting because, I was just talking with Laura Mazzata, another one of our co-authors in the book, and I realized I this coming week I am actually going to do that. I'm just going to like do less and just do like it's kind of like hashtag fuel my soul. So like what fuels my soul right now? Like that's what's going to happen. Um, and trust it, like it's like that to me is the biggest piece is trusting that that information that's coming through is it's there for a reason. Like we can keep
Mm-hmm.
fighting that or we can
Mm-hmm.
just kind of say yes to it and then see what happens. Like to me kind of just like saying yes to this book project. I mean, it's just so interesting when we do that. There's so much that can open up that like again like meeting you and all these amazing women who are a part of this project and other people who have come into my life. Like you just can't, if you were to go about just in the brain trying to like make all these things, it would be night and day. Like it would just be so, I don't know, like less of a lush flower garden.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's those like soul driven, hell full body yeses where you're like, yeah, that like possibilities open up that weren't in your periphery that you didn't think about. That they're not to think about. They're just there. And I also think what has happened to me is it expands the universe. And it's like, okay, so I start to learn, oh, well, when I just trust and I just jump into it and I follow that, then all of a sudden other possibilities that weren't even in my daily life. I mean, I'm sure like you, I literally have friends from around the world who,
Mhm.
if COVID hadn't happened, I would have never connected with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the idea of, expansion. Like we can get into these places where we're sort of living in constriction. It goes back to even like how we're in our car going to work, or these things that are just sort of mundane, like making school lunches for my kids, or doing school pickup, or these things that we kind of have to do. And when we kind of get into this place of living intuitively, like it's kind of fun. It's like, well, what's going to be the download next? And that because that's literally what life is anyway. And I think, the one not that it's binary, it's one either or, but when we get into the one side, I think it's sort of a side that wants to be safe and wants to understand what's next. And really, it's just that feeling of safety or wanting to avoid the feeling of fear. But, I mean, I think when we come into that place of like, we feel a little bit of that fear, like it actually is also vibrating with that feeling of excitement and
Mm.
possibility. And when we come into a place of recognizing we can trust, like when we're working with intuition, we can trust that's all of it, trusting the unknown. That's again another soul study for humans on the planet. Like that's everything, because I mean, everything is unknown. I don't know my last breath. I don't know what's going to happen exactly in 20 years. Like, it already is unknown. It's just recognizing, like, when I get to be divinely led, there's things I wouldn't have said 10 years ago. I would have co-written this book with you, and we'd be sitting here like this, having this conversation. Um, it's kind of in that saying, yes, I feel like that's a lot of what's happened for me in terms of, developing my intuition. It's been saying yes. It kind of started out with, when I first started coaching, I just kind of knew that I wanted to get quicker to what was really blocking people. And of
Hmm.
course, synchronistically, this training came through, which was this intuitive energy scan. And I was already really familiar with the chakra system, and it showed us how to scan the chakras. So it started with that. But I was like, well, I'm not a medium. I'm not going to do mediumship. I don't I don't communicate with past loved ones. And then when COVID hit, as you mentioned, I started running like an intuitive membership and, diving deeper into intuition. And again, what started happening, right, with coaching clients, it's like you were just allowing these things to start coming in.
Hmm.
And of course, the past loved ones started coming in. Um, and recognizing that. So it's like, okay. So, and then kind of asking myself, well, why would I ever even say like that's not part of what I do? So, or the Akashic records, like, okay, well,
Hmm.
I think if we think about it again, like there is we are part of this quantum field, right? The universe is like a constant creation. It's like a being of creation. Its whole thing is to create. Like people are constantly going to create more stuff, like the iPhone, which we were just watching Ferris Bueller's Days Off, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris Bueller, is that what's
Yep. Yep.
he's
You
on his
got
radio?
it.
Anyway, last night and like going back to those old phones, and I was like, look, you guys, there's no computers. Like, who knows what we're gonna have in 20 years? Like constant creation.
Yeah.
Well, if we just kind of surrender to that, like, we talk about the masculine and the feminine, like we get to receive divine downloads. We get to be divinely led. We get to receive and be open. Like that's the place of expansion. If I'm just trying to control my space in my life, like there's a lot that I'm probably going to miss out on. But when I open and I recognize like it's safe, it is safe, like because we are in the space of pure potential, like it is safe to say yes to this book. And it is safe, kind of like what you're saying, even to just decide I'm gonna just take the day off, take this week off, just do whatever I want for a week. Because it's part of the plan.
Exactly. Exactly. And I follow for Human Design, the Human Design podcast, Emma Dunwoody, and she
Mm.
talks about running the experiment. And I think I resonated so much with that, the idea of like, I love science. So running the experiment. So like when you decide that your life is about running the experiment, then it suddenly like the outcome doesn't matter so much because it's just like, well, let's see what happens. Like, let's see what happens when I follow my intuition,
Mhm.
And I think that for me has been so much fun. That
Mhm.
okay, let's try this experiment of my emotional authority. Let's try this experiment of when I sit and I get into the Akashic records and what happens there. And there are experiences that I've had that I never would have even thought about having as a result, both here on the earth plane and in meditation and in the Akashic records. And I think that is kind of why we're here, to
Mhm.
have both those sort of spiritual and science earthly bound experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I look at, so many things like that. Like the moment I decided, it had been on my mind for a while to buy my singing bowls. Again, it's like during kind of more of our lockdown of COVID, and I just knew it was time. So, they arrived and I'm on this app. And I mean, even just that alone for me, vibrationally, what it's done for my life, making that investment has been just priceless. And then
Mm-hmm.
the opportunities that have come through just sharing that. I mean, every time I do that, I just feel like I get to be in this place of pure bliss. I just, looking at these decisions where we said yes, like how wonderful what's come through. And I think alongside that, it's recognizing that like it's okay when things don't work out. Before this book, I signed up to do a different book, different person, completely different, completely unrelated to Laura DeFranco and this whole situation. And that particular book, it completely fell apart. The guy who was running it just disappeared. I don't know what happened exactly. We were able to, we got our money back. It all worked out fine, but I was like disappointed, but also recognizing like it's fine because when this one came up, I mean, the timing I feel like is even better. There's so much more. I even know there's more richness to my story, even since those couple of years ago. Like it's all fine that it didn't work out. Like a relationship dissolves, like okay, like that's okay. We are letting ourselves go apart for a reason. There's something
Mm-hmm.
that we've gained, that we've learned, that we've enriched our lives, and like it's okay. But when we come into that place of pure potential, I remember I've been married 11 years now, but before when I'd have boyfriends and we'd break up, like I would sometimes feel like, oh, is there anyone next? Like, but this is like this is such a silly thing to think about now. But at the time, it felt very real,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that space of pure potential, like, well, of course, like, I've developed as a human being through this relationship in a way to then allow this next person into my life who now is my husband and our two little children and this beautiful life that we've gotten to create. Like, I'm so grateful that that did not work out so that I could have this now.
Yes. Yes. And I think that that is the beauty of, like you said, kind of moving from that place of fear to that place
Mhm.
of freedom and freedom of possibility. And I've always gone back and kind of looked at, where did I think I was going to be and what really transpired? And for me, it was being able to go back and look at when I got divorced, and at the time just made me angry and bitter and unhappy, and then to look and see all of the lessons that were learned that made me who I am today and shape my relationships today. And then to move from being angry and bitter to forgiving to being grateful,
Mhm. Right.
and to being able to send really positive energy to that person.
Yes.
I think, and then what happens for you is if you are capable of that much forgiveness and love, then what else are you capable of? Like, where else can you go? And that gets
Mhm.
really exciting.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
And it brings us back full circle to we
yeah.
are literally expressions of love. Like,
Yeah.
right? Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful just to hear kind of your story and recognize that. And I look at times too in terms of trusting my intuition, where even coming into coaching, like before that, I was always doing jobs that I really loved, and yet they just
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like the end point. Like I just knew there was something more. I worked in outdoor education and corporate team building and a lot of really fun stuff. Therapeutic boarding schools for kids who were troubled youth, and I loved all of it. And yet, like, there was always something else. There was always something else, and there's still, of course, always something else. Like, there's always some new project. And yet, when I finally surrendered to like what I knew I was supposed to be doing, which I knew was coaching, but I had fears around it, and I said yes, and I let things synchronistically line up, like getting my first coach and doing that training. I look back and I'm like, I'm so glad I said yes. I'm so glad I didn't let fear continue to run me, because
Mm-hmm.
I would just, I mean, who knows? Like, maybe it would have taken a different curve and come into this place. I can't really look at like what outcome it would have been, but I am so grateful. I said yes. I said yes, even when I did feel afraid. Listening to my intuition because of where it's guided me and coming to a place where I really do feel now like I've landed. Like this is my jam. This is my place. I let go of a lot of fears around like what people would think about me being an intuitive. Like that's like a non-issue. But there's like all these things like let
Mm-hmm.
go, let go, surrender, receive, to come to this place where it does feel like I've landed, like this is where I'm meant to be.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That feels like such a beautiful place to end on. And I just want to give you a couple minutes to talk about the things you have going on, the ways people can connect with you. Obviously, everything will be in the show notes, so you don't have to give us the full websites or anything. But I just know that everybody's going to want to connect with you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I do have an Illuminate session, which is sort of my signature session to get into what's going on with your energy, where might you be blocked, what's like a past life story even. And I have, and my cat's here, she's like joined us.
I love
Um,
it.
I have a code if someone's interested in that for $60 off that session. So I know we'll have that in the show notes. And I'm also running a group program right now, a small group program on vision casting. So it's this insightful, intuitive, intelligent process to help us to really get clear on that which we really want and intuitively to allow ourselves to be guided in clearing the way energetically through our chakra system. So
Mm.
I'm super excited about that. And that's on my website too for anyone who wants to check that out.
Awesome. And I definitely recommend following Stephanie on social media and Instagram. I love your reels. I'm
Thank
not a
you.
reel girl. I've done literally two, and they were not me. They were videos that I did because I'm still learning. I'm very much at the beginner stage, but I love watching yours because I just think there is really something to the attraction of somebody who has very positive intentions and openness and isn't that salesy piece of things where there feels like this very push and drive. And I think it's about being who we are, and the people who are meant to be attracted to us will be attracted to us just by being more fiercely ourselves and not worrying about what anybody else thinks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are definitely divine downloads. Those are downloads when those come through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I get lots of those.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We
Write
can
them
talk in
down.
another. Oh yes, well, and just to be funny, like I have a notepad in my shower because that's where I get a lot of downloads from the water. So there are these little sheets that you can write on, and they're waterproof.
That's
So
fantastic.
yes, they're all over my house. So
I love it. That's good.
I want to do a final plug for Wealth Code, Sacred Strategies for Abundance, lead author Jen Pisano, who's actually hanging out in the wings, commenting on the side during our podcast, just sending us lots of positive vibes and love. We have the link in the show notes for this. You can also get the Kindle and paperback version on Amazon. And I highly recommend if anybody is looking to overhaul their wealth, their abundance, feeling, open in their lives. This is basically a self-study to take you through all of the areas that are going to help you have more wealth and abundance in your life. I'm looking forward myself to going through each chapter. But as I said at the beginning, I think I'm starting at the end because I want to dive into Stephanie's tool a little bit more. I want to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing so much of yourself on this podcast so generously. And I know people who are listening now and in the future are going to find so many gems in our conversation that are going to inspire and change their lives.
Oh, thank you. It's just been such a beautiful and rich conversation with you, Kelly. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And everybody hop into the show notes at the end of this and stay curious. You never know where that curiosity